I mean, if this landlord wasn't Anthony Albanese, this thing doesn't make the news.
This guy wouldn't be living there.
But I do find that there's a lot more publicity of apartments or being showcased where the value has gone down.
We had my niece's third birthday at this like hall in Harrington Grove, PJ. Is that a suburb? Harrington Grove?
It's a pretty fancy area with McMansions everywhere.
There are fucking, mate, I'm telling you.
It's like a gated community.
Jesus Christ.
I've never been out there.
You could probably get, because there's like houses like built on like 3
Because I think the suburb
blocks.
is Harrington Park.
Right.
It's Harrington Park and Grove.
But this estate is like Harrington.
Very
like, you know when
impressive.
they name their own area? Like, you know it's a bit more fancy.
Very impressive.
Yeah,
like,
man, the houses
are
huge.
very nice, very big. If it wasn't 4 hours from Sydney, that would be mad.
Man, it is far, isn't it? Yeah, because I've been out there back in the days as a mobile lender, driving there at night, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna.
You're scared.
I'm not gonna make it home. And then there's a kangaroo jumping around. You're just like, all right, man, I'm dead.
There's no kangaroo.
I'm dead.
No,
100%.
I've done some driving in my time. You got to be pretty.
Have you been to Harrington Grove?
There was one hopping across
at my parents' backyard,
the Harbour
man.
Bridge.
Mate, there's kangaroos at
Harbour
all.
Bridge.
Yeah, did you not see that?
We
It was like a
ride
couple of years
kangaroos to
ago.
work. Are you not Australian? What's wrong with you?
What's the other
He'd
suburb? Is it
escaped.
Orchid Hills?
Orchid.
Is it Orchard Hills?
Orchard.
Yeah, Orchard Hills.
Orchid Hills.
As I'm leaving, the customer's like, "Oh, just watch out when you're driving around for kangaroos."
Yeah.
Because that night, I'm like,
Yeah.
"No worries, man."
He's taking the piss.
Okay. No, but
it's
legit,
legit.
they got kangaroos
Legit,
jumping
man.
around. Seriously.
These things happen.
Mate, there's rabbits
Yeah.
at Carlingford.
Yeah, rabbits. It's different.
Rabbits.
There was a fox in
Rabbits and
Abbotsford.
kangaroo, they're very different sizes.
We got foxes. We got possums.
Oh,
I
100%.
drove out of my
Ducks?
I drove out with with Camilla to school today, and there was like 3 bush turkeys just wandered across my car.
Oh, well, they're everywhere. They're pests now.
They're crazy.
Yeah,
Yes.
mate.
Not
There's,
ibises, the bush turkeys.
Not the bin chickens.
No, not bin chickens, bush
Yeah.
turkeys.
yeah,
You
man.
know, they actually
They are
call
everywhere too, though,
brush
the ibis. They're
turkeys,
everywhere.
not bush
they're the
turkeys.
worst. We didn't have
Yeah,
ibis.
they are.
Brush
Brush
turkeys.
Yeah, I didn't
that what
realise that.
Brush
Yeah.
turkeys.
Yes,
Maybe
rather
they're
than
called
bush turkeys.
I feel like you could cook a brush turkey. Like it would be delicious.
There was a guy doing that with the ibises.
Oh, is there?
What?
Yuck.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, the Asian guy, right? Is trying to
Is
catch
that
one
legal?
in,
Are they not protected?
yeah.
Because like, I feel
I
like
don't know.
No
they're...
one mentioned race,
Yeah,
Jason,
yeah.
until
Oh, no,
you
it was
did.
just a factual observation.
Yeah.
That's all.
Right.
But I mean,
have you seen it? Have you seen the TikTok? It's like it would have been American accent, and she's like, you know, you come to Australia, there's these beautiful birds, like so majestic and they're huge beaks and vibrant, and they call them bin chickens.
Because we know the truth.
That's incredible.
That's funny.
That's
Yeah.
they are
incredible.
bin chickens.
But
Yeah.
You know where there's no bin chickens?
where there's no bins. Where?
No, I fucked it up.
No,
So
no.
Sorry about it.
No, start again.
And of the planned properties.
Oh, was that meant to be a segue?
In
Yeah,
the
it was very
sales
bad.
office.
Very bad. I've done better in the past.
You know what? You know what? You're allowed to have one bad segue, but we never have a bad episode here at Property Now.
Ooh.
That was
The podcast
Damn.
inspired by Australia's favourite topic, which is property, and hopefully inspiring some of your conversations at home with your mates, with your family. We want to keep those Australian property conversations going, keep the Australian dream alive. We're back. I'm Michael Carboni. My friends call me Carbs. You, Chris Ferris, can call me Carbs as well. How are you, man?
good, man. I love how it just goes into podcast.
Mate, that was
Isn't
just
that
Yes.
just like
instinctive.
conversational
it's
and then
called-
bang straight in.
Yes.
It's called
Love it.
professional. You can all take some tips and some cues. But Jason, he the sexiest
No more
voice in
comments.
property.
No more compliments for this bloke.
Hey, I just called you the sexiest voice in property.
Oh, I take that back. I take that back.
How are you, man?
Hey, everybody.
Good singing last week. We ended the the show with like B sharps. I don't know if you remember as far as last
I don't
week.
know, man.
It was
Yeah.
goodbye, just saying.
We should-
Thanks.
Maybe we do it every week. We'll see
Okay.
what happens.
Goodbye.
No,
We'll
boys,
just say hello.
It's slow now. Yeah.
you always get mate. Always get it wrong. Very colourful today, Savannah. For anyone watching, how are you?
Yeah, good.
Welcome
Excited
back.
to talk about today's topic.
It's a big topic today.
Yes.
It's an interesting one. It's one we can all. I feel like we could talk about this one for hours. We'll try and keep it to our usual under an hour. But first, PROPTOK. So we're going to do this week's
on
PROPTOK.
PROPTOK first.
We're getting a lot. I love our own personal group chat. There's a lot of PROPTOK like potentials going through the chat. If there's any listeners or viewers at home, send us your PROPTOKs as
There's
well.
heaps of property bros out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of property bros. Some are good, some are bad. What have we got today?
Ooh.
We're going to find out. PJ can edit some of this because
Technology.
technology.
Peter's like, take me back to Composite Street.
Peter's like, Composite Street.
I heard that, Peter.
Samsung.
He's just sitting there refreshing TikTok while he's editing this.
It's not worth the effort doing this.
Here we go. We're going to mirror this one.
Let's see if you can get it.
No. PJ is like, we're going to get like 10,000 views. All right, here we go. Ready, guys?
All right.
Let's prop talk.
There is no way I'd be able to sleep at night if one of my friends bought an apartment as an investment property. This apartment in Melbourne sold 4 days ago for $600,000 and it's got a beautiful view, but views do not equal ROI. We can see that the vendor held it for 6.5 years, but they bought it for $570,000. So given their entry costs like stamp duty, their selling costs like agent fees, and all of the holding costs, they've ultimately sold this property for a loss. And it wasn't even high yielding for them. So if you have a limited budget at a number like $600,000, that doesn't mean you have to buy an apartment. With this budget, you can buy a house interstate, whether that be Perth, Northern Queensland or Adelaide, and they will actually grow. If that sounds like you, you're welcome to contact me. There is a link in my bio.
All right, guys.
Be able to sleep.
Ella Cass.
Ella.
Thoughts? Chris.
Oh, look.
Self-promotion.
Yeah, definitely self-promotion. Hey, contact me. I got all the answers. I mean, like, has she considered that it's not, maybe wasn't just an investment? Someone's buying it to actually have a roof over their head and wanting to live in it. So, like, it's not just about whether they're going to make money on it. They're just wanting to live in it.
Yeah, look, that's a good point. And I've always find that a bit of a dilemma for myself, right? Because I agree with what you're saying. But, you know, but when I think about it, it's like, yes, you want to buy something to live in it, but would you want to buy something to live in and at the same time, wouldn't it be great?
To make some money. Yeah, I get it.
Do you, and which one takes priority? You know, does buying something to live in it purely 100% take priority over buying something to live in that can also have potential for growth?
No, you always want to chase both.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to say, I just want to live, so I'm happy to lose money. That's never the scenario. You've got to try and absolutely chase both. And I think what Ella's trying to say is there's better opportunities out there, like Perth or North Queensland or Adelaide, but it's in Victoria. Maybe they don't want to live in those other locations. Maybe that's one of the only options that they have, is to buy that more affordable apartment. You know, 600,000 is affordable apartment. Maybe that's their only option, to be able to live in something.
The other thing too is, right, so she's saying, hey, I would tell my friends not to invest in an apartment based on this one apartment in Melbourne that didn't do well in the last couple of years. Yeah. Like, we need a bit of a broader scope here. Like, if an apartment in Sydney during the same time period may have went a lot better. Maybe the time period for houses in Melbourne might have been similar to that as well. I'm not too sure, but there's this no context. It's like one example.
That's
of
exactly
why
right.
You should never buy an apartment.
Because I can pick one example as well. We've recently had a client buy off the plant an apartment in the Gold Coast. And when she settled, the apartment went up by 150 grand.
Yeah.
So that's an example too, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to pick. But there are situations where the value has gone down. There are situations where the value has gone up. But I do find that there's a lot more publicity of apartments or being showcased where the value has gone down.
Yeah.
But maybe it wasn't the right time to sell as well. Like, it could have been a dip in the market. If they'd waited, it might have made money.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, because you can really see some of that sales history.
Yes.
Like the first person bought at this price, made money.
Yeah.
The next person didn't make money. The next person made a lot of money.
You never know. Maybe it's at a point in the cycle where the next few years for Melbourne apartments might be different. Now, look,
that's the thing. It's a cycle, right? And we don't know. I don't know the date when they purchased, if that was on there. But as Sav was saying, the timing may be off.
Yeah.
Like, we know what's been happening in Victoria in the last 4 or 5 years since COVID. There's been droves of people leaving Victoria. And then you've also got new property taxes that are coming in. Yeah. Like, what effect is this having on the confidence of people buying in Victoria? So looking at that one example in isolation is really flawed thinking.
Plus, apartment supply in Melbourne CBD in the last few years, it's the one area where there's probably a bit of oversupply. It's like the one area in Australia where there's a bit of oversupply. Yeah. If you look at, I know I hear Effie Zahos saying all the time, you know, at the moment in Sydney, for example, apartments are growing a bit faster than houses. Yeah. That's just a moment in time as well, and it won't be like that forever. Traditionally, houses do grow faster. But, man, I just don't think Ella sounds great. I'm sure she's a great buyer's agent. She's not a property bro. She's a property broette. And but like, give us more than one example. I'd love to see Jason stitch in that and just saying, hey, Ella, I've got a client who actually made money buying an apartment. I'd love to see you.
Yeah, look, just disclosure, conflict of interest. Ella does follow me.
She does.
And I follow her back. Her content's pretty good, man. Like, I mean, that's, yes, one example, but she does do a lot of good content, great analysis, things that make logical sense.
Yeah, look at this
guy.
guy.
Sorry, guys.
Wow.
Look, I'm out, man. I'm out. I've excluded myself. Yeah.
Now, look, entitled to an opinion, and you're right. Her content is typically quite good.
And I think if she's looking at it from the purely investment point of view, don't get me wrong, there probably are other better investments out there. But I think looking into it a bit more detail, and then looking on the macro level, like what's happening in the Victorian market, timing is a huge one. I think you need to look at it just rather than just saying price and this is what they sold it for, they lost money. I think you need to look at why did they lose money? When did they purchase? Was it the peak? When did they sell? Was it the bottom of the cycle? So I think you need to look into it a little bit further.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, just a bit of a hack or tip for the listeners is that all that data around the sales history is really easy to access now. So even when you're on the real estate app, and I'm quite a big fan of it, is they're promoting their own website called property.com.au. So literally you punch in the address and it tells you what the sale history is. So I think it'd be a pity if someone was buying the property to live in it, but they didn't know that aspect of it to make their decision. So, but if you do know and you understand and you're still happy with it because that shelter is more important, then absolutely there's nothing wrong with that.
But it's funny, time in the market. It's all about
timing
that moment in time,
market.
that timing, right? So just because it didn't grow in the last 2 years, it might be about to. It's like the little old lady walking around the poker machines looking for the one that hasn't.
But
paid
is Ella
out.
going to do a story in 4 or 5 or 6 years' time when this buyer who's just brought it, and they might sell it for 700? Is she going to do a story about, hey, this person made X amount?
Well, maybe Jason can ask her. They're obviously friends.
Just on TikTok.
But it's a good segue to today's topic, right? Because today's topic is all about buying off the plan and the stigma for buying off the plan. So Ella, obviously, as a buyer's agent, doesn't like off the plan, and that's fine. I see a few buyer's agents that don't. I see buyer's agents that are for. There's reasons, for and against. We're going to unpack that today, and I'm going to start with the video from a current affair which inspires your story. It's one of those developer bad stories, so let's check that out. And Peach can tick tock. We can
I don't know if you needed to qualify though to develop a bad story. I don't know how many good developer stories are happening on a current
affair. You don't see a current affair property develop.
Right. That is a good point. They're either really bad or they're going bankrupt or they've fled the country.
That's just the reality.
Or they've left a trail of destruction.
Yes.
Well, spoiler alert, this is one of those.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
They get a bad rap, some developers.
Ex-developer over here.
Can you declare your conflict of interest, please?
I've just got a few developers that follow me on
You're
TikTok.
friends with the buyer's agent. Chris is an ex-developer. We're just busted.
We're getting cancelled.
Far out property now.
That's our money. That's all of my friends' money. We work hard for every single dollar. It's impacting my mental health. It's impacting my wife's mental health. And it's taking toll on our family, man.
They're an angry mob, and rightly so, united by a single cause: to get the developer of this northwestern Sydney site to hand over the blocks they paid deposits on.
I just want to ask you about the 154 families that have bought blocks of land there 3.5 years ago.
I don't think you got the facts correct.
Oh, I think I do.
So they've got 100,000 of your money and they've had it for into the 4th year now.
Yeah, we are in the 4th year.
We are not rich people, mate. You know what I mean? It took us years to put this deposit together.
154 blocks sold in the Clydesdale Gardens development at Marsden Park in late 2020 and early 2021. Cypressat and Divya sold their apartment to raise enough equity for the deposit. In the meantime, they've been renting. Lots at Clydesdale were sold by Boyuan Holdings Limited, the BHL group.
We could probably cut it there.
Yeah.
Right, and we could probably cut a bit
I
of
think
that
we can
out.
figure out what's going on.
Yeah. So what's going on?
Who wants to have a crack?
Well, you could. Well, let's tell us.
Oh, look, it doesn't look good. I mean, in a nutshell, you probably think that the developer may have sold them, or the developer has sold the lots. Maybe they've sold them too cheap as to what the market is doing right now.
Yeah.
And they're potentially trying to activate what's called a sunset clause to get out of the contracts.
I think that's what they're saying in the video as well.
Can you explain? Can
Yeah.
you explain what that means?
So,
Let's
I
unpack
mean,
that.
in New South Wales, and there's other different clauses in different states, but if you've got a sunset, which all contracts have a sunset clause in for off the plan, and what that is this is a date that, so if you buy today, so the 1st of January, which is not today, but the 1st of January 2020, right? They may have a sunset clause, and they're saying the latest that we can deliver this property to you or this lot to you is in 4 years' time, so 1st of January 2024. If it gets to that particular time, you have rights to potentially rescind contract, so get out of the contract and get your deposit back if the developer hasn't delivered. That's your choice. Or the developer can then turn around and say they can't deliver it by that particular sunset date. But the developer can also extend sunset dates in off the plan. So if there's, months of rainfall or if there's unforeseen events, they can extend the sunset dates in contracts if they haven't been able to deliver it in that time.
Yep.
Giving the developer flexibility to actually get the project delivered. But what could happen in that time, in a 4-year period, is, and we've seen that, which it's been outlawed to a degree, where if the property prices have moved in that time, if you're with a development that the prices have gone up, they may decide to actually not fulfill their obligations, and that's a problem off the plan.
So the sunset clause is there so that the buyer knows that this is kind of the rough.
It's a date.
It's like the latest we can expect for this to be complete.
Without that clause, the contract can go on forever. So they need a date where they can say, okay, we need to be able to either get out of the contract or force delivery of the property, and that's what's happening.
But you think in this case, developers sold a few years ago for X amount of dollars. The properties are probably now worth considerably more than that. Yep. So you think the developer wants to enact the sunset clause
potentially, and there's also on the flip side. And on the flip side, the costs of delivering that lot have probably gone up substantially, and there may not actually be a profit margin potentially for the developer. We know that's an issue in a lot of developments across the country where the feasibilities aren't stacking. So they may have undertaken pre-sales, so pre-sold to some of the buyers that we've seen in that video. Then they usually go and engage a builder or a contractor, in this case, civil contractor, to go put the roads and drainage and facilities in, and maybe the costs are blown out, and therefore they're not going to make any profit on that particular project. But I think the bigger issue here is probably the communication to the buyers. I think there's been a lack of communication.
So has there been any changes for buyer protection in that case, like you mentioned just now?
There's definitely been changes in that for the buyers for their protection, where they can force delivery. But at the same time, if the developer physically can't deliver the project, there's not much you can do there.
Right. Okay.
Is there some sort of insurance? Because I was reading up on this, and it seems that if the builder or the developer goes missing or insolvent or they're dead, then there's some sort of insurance that comes into place.
In terms of the insurance, so that's, you mean after they've settled?
Yeah.
So after they've settled, if there's an insurance called latent defects insurance, where they're able to basically claim on this insurance policy that the builder is gone, the developer's gone, I've got defects in this apartment or lot, and I need it fixed. You can claim on that insurance. But I think in this case, they haven't even settled yet. They haven't even got the property.
So there's no protection.
There's no protection. So the only protection is you'll get your deposit back.
Right. I hope so, though, because what if they...
They should be.
You do get it back, but what about the opportunity cost? If you put down a deposit 4 years ago...
That's right.
You're thinking... You could be sitting back thinking, hey, my property is actually already going up in value. We're going to have this beautiful home. It's all young families out in Marsden Park, which is like sort of Greater Western Sydney for anyone that doesn't know the area. All of a sudden, they get their deposit back, but the prices have doubled.
Gone up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Just like that couple that's been renting.
Yeah.
So they were expecting it
they sold their house.
Yeah, for it to be ready in 6 months. Yeah. So now it's been 3.5 years. So they've been paying rent for an extra 3 years.
That's
like 90 grand, 100 grand just gone.
At CoPosit, your funds are held in trust as a third party, so you can be confident in the security of your off-the-plan purchase. This episode is brought to you by CoPosit, where 10K means you can buy a brand new home. So check out the website, coposit.com.au now. And I think you always got to consider that it's going to take more time than the agent tells you in the sales suite if you are buying off the plan. If they say, look, it's 6 months, like you can see if it's out of the ground or not. you can see the progress, you're probably going to be able to work that out. And like you said, if there's 6 months of rain, then there's nothing the developer can do about that.
Yeah, particularly
and that's the point of being able to extend the sunset clause. But when you hear stories like this, it's little wonder that you hear things like, oh yeah, big bad greedy property developers. Like if they want to rescind contracts, then a whole bunch of people actually lose, and it's not a great story.
But this is what puts the negative, light on off the plan. But I will say, and I'm not, maybe I am biased towards off the plan, right? But it's the outlier. These are the outlying cases.
Yeah.
Like this is not the case for a lot of parties. A lot of parties have been able to get into off the plan and be able to get the home ownership dreams. It may be the only option for a lot of people because it's more affordable generally with off the plan.
Well,
but you only hear of the negative stories.
Yeah.
But it's one bad apple.
Yeah.
So
But it's actually, I mean, obviously David Chandler is on a mission to, get rid of all the dodgy developers. But he was saying that it's up to 20% of New South Wales property developers that are actually dodgy, according to the research that he's been doing.
So tell us who David Chandler is, because we know who he is, but our listeners
You
might
probably
not.
can explain it better. But yeah, the building commission that goes around to check on developments that are already existing or developments that are being built.
Yeah, so David's building commissioner in New South Wales. So he's a good follow on LinkedIn in particular. Maybe we'll use him as a LinkedIn PROPTOK in future, because he goes around to the developer sites and says, hey, this is good, this is bad, this needs to be fixed, et cetera, et cetera.
The most effective, and David's done a lot, but I think the most effective thing that David has done in the development industry is if there's a building that is dodgy and it has defects, the clients don't settle and then deal with it after settlement. What happened in the past with dodgy developers and builders was the clients would buy, it'd be a defected building, they would still be forced to settle because that's what the legislation, they got OC, they got strata plan registered, for example, they'd still be forced to settle and then have to deal with the developer and builder after settlement. When it's after settlement, it's too late.
So hard.
So what David has done is he stops the settlement from happening, i.e. stops, like a Mascot Towers situation, which was a huge issue where everyone had to leave their properties and it's going to get demolished. He stops people from settling and gets the defects fixed first, then lifts the prohibition orders on that project, and then people can settle. That's been one of the most, and I think that's actually a really good move for confidence in the industry and for off the plan. If you're buying, knowing that, particularly in New South Wales, knowing that there's a commissioner that can come in and say, no, this property is defected, we're not going to let anyone settle until you fix these defects.
Yeah.
But is that what happened? So Mascot Towers, there was the one in Homebush as well.
Opal
Towers, and that's the reason for all of this sort of changes coming into play, and it's been great. But is that what stopped? So there's the other property developer in Castle Hill, who we won't name.
Top Place, yeah, we can name it.
Well, Top Place, they, and the owner has fled to Lebanon with everyone's money. Was that project stopped? That project was stopped, right? Do you know more about this one?
So I don't know if he fled with everyone's money. I think he just fled. I think it's more, probably God knows what in terms of the money situation. But he fled with a lot of buildings that have defects out there.
Yeah.
So and they're still subject to those prohibition orders that we're talking about. So in the past, people would have been, if they got to completion, people would have been forced to settle, and they'd be stuck with this problem. As opposed to now, there's a problem where there's an unoccupied tower, and they're trying to get it fixed now, retrospectively.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the issue in that scenario. But again, the protections that are there has meant that people aren't settling. There's still absolutely an opportunity cost. Like someone's put a deposit down 3, 4, 5 years ago. Property prices have shot up since then.
Yep.
And there's absolutely an opportunity cost.
People put their life savings into being able to secure a property, and this just devastating.
But the flip side of that, I want to bring back to what you mentioned, Chris, is that there's the positives to that as well. Is, for example, that Marsden Park area, and I know it really well because we've had a lot of clients buy landing there and build, and they did exactly the same thing. And Clydesdale is actually one of the sort of developments that I was aware that came a bit later. But those clients have done really well because they did exactly the same thing. They bought the land off the plan unregistered, registered in a couple of years. They built the home. The total cost was about 750, 800 grand. Now the average price of a house there is 1 point something million. Right, so they've benefited from that off the plan process, right? Whereas in this particular situation, it hasn't turned out the right way. But again, right, we don't know what the situation is, whether the developer's intention is to kind of resell the property. It could be a feasibility issue because the story just focuses on big bad.
Buyers,
we can't assume that that the developer, because they weren't able to speak for themselves or defend themselves.
There's only two scenarios in that
Yeah.
case. There's only the first scenario, which is the land has gone up and they're going to try and remove the contracts and resell them. That's one scenario. Or they're happy to go ahead, but the costs of just it doesn't make it feasible to actually finish the project.
Yeah, but
They're
what
really the
about-
only two scenarios that are there for that developer. Why else would they not have been delivering that project?
So what happens in the situation, for example, that, you know, let's say they're having challenges and difficulties with their actual business, you know, so it doesn't fall into one of the two.
As in, like, with their lenders or
Yeah,
whatnot?
you know, so whatever the situation is, they've lost their finance, or, you know, they don't
That
have
could
the
probably
capabilities.
come under that feasibility. That's
Yeah.
probably also what I'm talking about. Like that
Right.
feasibility of the overall side. But you're talking more about the company itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So if they go under, what happens for the buyers?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I would hope that everyone has not agreed to release deposits. So that's a big no-no in the off-the-plan space. Do not release deposits. Ensure that they're held with solicitors or agents when you're paying off the plan. When you're buying off the plan property, whether it's 5-10% deposit, co-deposit, whatever it is, make sure that it's held in a trust account, a regulated trust account, and not released to the developer. It's very rare circumstances where they get released to the developer, but just make sure. So I hope in this scenario it hasn't been. If it hasn't been, in this scenario, like, what's probably going to happen is they're going to write to them saying, we're not proceeding, you can take your funds back, and you walk away.
Yeah.
Right, and they will be. It's going to be heartbreaking for them because they're going to walk away and have to pay X
They've
amount of
lost money,
$100,000. They've lost. There's opportunity.
Yeah.
And
They
there's
haven't lost money. They've lost
Yeah.
the potential of the future gain,
Yeah.
right, on that
Yeah.
property.
and there is
Because if
this,
the property price had have tanked, they'd probably be happy to
they'd
get
be
out.
happy to get
Yeah.
out.
True,
But
but
it hasn't.
Correct.
if
Yeah.
that money had been sitting in savings, they might have, you know, accrued some
Or they
interest.
could have bought
or-
somewhere else in the other
Yes.
locations. And that's the thing. Like this, there's one developer. You hear about the negative developer, but there's been thousands of lots delivered
Yeah.
in that area.
that area.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So
Yeah.
like,
It's
you
a
don't-
bad apple, but
it's a bad apple.
Yeah.
It is.
You don't hear the ACA aren't running a story on developer develops nice community and everyone is happy to have made a little bit of money. That's
Yeah.
not the story that's
Yeah.
coming out, even though there's more of those stories, right?
Yeah.
Or there has been more of those stories.
Absolutely.
It's the one or two, it's the Opal Towers, it's this,
Yeah.
it's the bad stigma, and it gives off the plan a really bad
It
stigma.
does.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Right?
does.
So let's unpack that a little bit because I think, look, in any investing, and property is an investment. Like if you live there, it's an investment in your future. It's your nest egg. You know, if you're a property investor, if you invest in other things as well, there's always a risk in investing. And with off the plan, it's probably a little bit riskier than existing property for reasons like this, right? But you need to understand what is good, what is bad, what is pro, what is con, what to look out for. You know, you've just mentioned the good one, Chris. You want to make sure that your funds are being held in trust.
Your deposit.
Your deposit is being held in trust, right? So that's important.
Pending release at settlement when you're going to get your property.
So what are we looking for in maybe if you're looking at off the plan as an option for you? What should you be looking for? You know, if you're doing research on an area or a developer, like let's open that up a little bit. Let's let the listeners know because it can be tricky. You can, like, if you make the wrong decision, you can end up like these families. But you can also end up like a whole bunch of other people that, like you said earlier, Jace, you had a client bought off the plan in Queensland a couple of years ago.
Yep.
They've made 150K.
Yep.
After they've settled.
Yep.
Like, that's a beautiful story.
From not doing anything.
Everyone would
other
know,
than paying
mate,
a deposit.
How
and
do I get some of that?
held in trust.
How do I get some of that?
Yeah.
I mean, finding the reputable developers and builders first is paramount. Like you've got to find someone that has delivered in the past. Like, again, I really feel for these buyers because it may have seemed like Clydesdale developer, I think it's BHL, was reputable and they have delivered in the past. And it really is just unfortunate because there's thousands of other people that have bought in the same location from reputable developers that have been able to get it. So I think get their property. So finding that reputable developer is something that's really
And they were
important.
even listed on the ASX.
That's
So
true.
if you're doing
It
due
feels very
diligence,
reputable.
Yes.
you're thinking, wow, publicly
it's like, how
listed
do you cut
company.
through that noise then now?
Yeah.
That's why I feel like this one's probably just a really unfortunate circumstance. And in terms of the risk, like the risk is so they're not going to lose their funds if they're held in trust. They're not going to lose their deposit funds. The risk is that of the future gain, that they're losing that future gain.
Yeah.
So it's that opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And there is, like as Jason mentioned, if they've purchased their lots for 800, they definitely have moved up since then. They've gone
absolutely.
to 1.1, 1.2, 1. So there's that loss. That perceived loss, right? Then I could have had that 300-400 gain.
They would have been,
and they need to go buy something else now for that 1.2.
Until this, they would almost be celebrating that they've made money, but they actually have not yet. What do you look for Sav, if you're looking at you're looking around in the market at the moment?
Yeah.
What are some things you'd look for in a developer or a builder?
Yeah, track records. I think that's very important. Even a social media presence. Like if a developer is willing to put their progress and their stories out there, for me, it seems like they don't have anything to hide. So if there's progress of the builds, I think that's definitely a good sign.
I like to think that developers get better with each development, especially if you look at apartments, for example. Land development is a little bit different subdivision, but like if you look at the developer's previous apartment and their previous apartment, they typically get better and better. So they get better at what they do.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's a good advice to look at some of the track record. I think that's a great one.
The tricky thing as well with this case is I think they brought in 2021, was it? Like we're in 2024 now.
Yeah.
Land typically doesn't take 4 years to get delivered.
Correct.
So maybe I feel like they could have been a bit more aggressive with how they dealt with the developer in the early stages. Again, talking with the sunset date. If you've bought and there's been promises of it being delivered within 6 and 12 months, and then you're talking 2 years later, I think you should be trying to get out of that contract.
Yeah.
Because it was meant to be delivered within the same year that they put down a deposit.
I agree with that.
Like cut your losses.
I agree with that.
Not cut your losses.
You shouldn't be
try and get out of it.
Yeah.
Try and find something else.
Getting together 4 years later for a video opportunity with a current affair is probably a little bit too late to be making a move, right? And like, I don't want to blame the people as well. Like, I don't want to like
condone what
extremely
the developer's
unfortunate.
doing
Exactly.
either, But 4 years, mate, I would be pretty...
For land, especially, it's like apartments is different, but for land, that's a long time.
The guy is saying, mental health, him and his wife, like, man, you
can imagine,
you can imagine, that would be terrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they just want to provide a place for their kids to grow up in, like a home.
By the time they're done, the kids are grown up potentially,
The thing is, we're not talking about investors here. Like, we're talking about people, like first-time buyers, owner
put their
occupiers
life savings into
want to live in it.
Yeah.
Having a place to live. Yeah.
If it was too early, would you look at that as like a little bit more risky as well?
When you say too early, what do you mean?
Well, looking at that, like if the sunset clause there was 2 years away for house and land, maybe you go, oh, hold on, I kind of want something a bit sooner. Like, is it riskier when there's more time?
It seems like the sunset date has either been extended or it was a long sunset date to begin with. If they brought in 2020, 2021, it seems like, and they're still in the contract, then it seems like the sunset date has been pretty long, or it's gone past the sunset date and the buyers have decided not to terminate the contract, because the buyer can still, if it goes past the sunset date, the buyer can decide that they don't want to terminate the contract and they can try and force delivery, which is obviously what they're trying to do, probably because there's a perceived...
They see they've made money.
Whereas the developer's probably happy for them to rescind in that scenario, so they're probably just playing the time game.
Do you think with construction costs going up so much, you hear about this all the time, that these scenarios are going to happen more frequently?
Yeah. Look, again, I don't think we know, and as Jace mentioned, we don't know enough on the other side from the developers to what's happened.
Yeah.
They seem like they're still in operation.
Yeah.
I mean, they went to their office.
Other projects. Signage is up. And that's the thing, it's a conflict of interest. You got owners who have made a couple of $100,000 and the developer thinking maybe we can make an extra couple hundred. There's a bit of a conflict there. Construction is different. So if there's you see a lot, there's been a lot of stories about home builders going under recently.
Yeah.
And you can understand that. If you've got a contract for 50 homes and all of a sudden price of materials have gone up and labour's gone up by 40%, and you've agreed to terms over here, and all of a sudden it's costing you, almost
I can tell you now, the builders' margins are not 40%.
No.
So if the costs are going up 40%, their margins are just eroded.
Catch-22 then, right? Because this is also for bigger apartment developments where this is happening.
Well, how could we predict that it would have gone
We
like
can't,
that,
but that's the thing. It makes it hard to then trust.
So let's talk about off the plan. Like, why does off the plan even exist then? If there are issues like this, what is the reason for off the plan? Can we explain that? Can we explain that in simple terms for everyone?
Why does it exist?
Yeah.
Look, I'm not too sure why does it actually exist. Try to do some research around the history of it, but couldn't get much information. But I think, off the plan exists from a purchaser's perspective to allow someone. So there's some benefits around it. Is that you might not have the full amount of money to purchase a property that's going to settle in a few weeks.
Yep.
Right. You want to plan for the future. You have enough money to pay the initial deposit. Right. So you want to do that and plan and save towards your way. For the next 2 years or so you can settle on this property. right? But I think it also helps the developers, secure their financing.
Exactly.
Right, so that you don't have to have a developer have all the money in cash to build this apartment, for example, because they often need to borrow from the bank. And it gives the bank a level of comfort that you've been able to sell a majority number of apartments that you're going to build, and you have committed buyers in the process. So I think that's where off the plan comes about. But I don't know who's invented it. Did the financiers come up with this idea to give themselves more security and mitigate the risks of lending to a developer, or did a developer actually invent this idea? Who's come up with this concept?
I think it's a supply thing, right? You hit the nail on the head. If the developer needed all the money in cash to start building, and they start building today, that's fine. But who's got hundreds of millions of dollars? It's very difficult. So what happens is, and you might be able to explain this better than I, Mr. Ex-Developer Chris, but if you want to build 100 units, then you probably need to borrow some of that money from a financier, and the financier needs to see a certain amount of pre-sales before they give you the money and you can start building.
Yeah, and I mean, even from a developer's point of view, if you're going to be doing 100 apartments, for example, pre-sales help you test the market. So they help you see if there's actually a market for this product. I mean, no one wants to go out there building 100, particularly with these larger scale projects. You wouldn't want to go out there and build 100, 200, 300 apartments without pre-selling any. Without testing the market first. And, if you've got a completed stock and then you realise, hey, no one actually wants this stock, you don't test the marketability of that product. But then I think on the purchaser side as well, it actually it's great for time planning. I think we've seen a lot of benefits for the last 10, 15 years on the off the plan side of things where taking away some of those negative experiences. There's been hundreds of thousands of people that have bought off the plan who have done really well financially from them, who have been able to live in these properties and create families and homes. So I think there's a lot of stigma that comes with off the plan, but there's been a lot of success stories. I think we just don't hear about those success stories a lot in the media, and I can probably give you thousands of success stories that we've had just on a personal level. So I think, why does it exist? I think there's multiple parties, from purchasers to financiers to developers, who actually need the off the plan side of things to exist, to actually get these large, particularly on the larger scale projects in there. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, you're building 10 apartments where they're 3-level brick walk-ups. Like, this is different. It's not just 10 apartments. You're talking about large-scale developments which need to have that marketability of, does this product work in market? Can it sell once it's built? You need to have that marketability, that test in market.
The thing is, we're talking about housing supply. This is what fixes housing supply: more apartments, more land, more homes, right? And I think, again, it goes back to the risk, right? So I hear a lot of advice I hear is don't buy off the plan until they've started construction. But they need to get that level of pre-sales as well, so that can drag things out. I think the earlier you go in, the more opportunity there is for you to make money in a short period of time. But obviously, it's also risky because you could have something like this happen or lose money in that period of time. So again, it depends on your appetite for risk. Definitely do your research, definitely look into the developer. But if you've got an appetite for risk and it's an investment and you've made money this way before, you're probably more likely to.
When you say risk, what do you mean by risk?
Well,
you say appetite for risk. What risk to me? When I hear the word risk, it means I'm going to lose. So
it means you can gain. You can probably gain as much as you can lose. So, for example,
but you said if you're prepared to have your appetite for a little bit more risk.
So I'll tell you.
What's the risk?
I'll tell you exactly what I mean. These people here in Marsden Park, I could probably go to 10 minutes down the road and buy a house that's already been built, right? There's not as much risk in that because the house is built. I get it checked. I can move in tomorrow. Whereas with this, I can probably get it for a little bit less maybe, but it's going to take a little bit more time, and something like this can happen.
But you also get what you're wanting, particularly with a lot.
Exactly.
When you're building your house.
Exactly.
You could buy that one down the street. It's probably not exactly what you want. It's not brand new.
Exactly.
But then you can get something that's brand new, customized and built how you want. 3, 4 bedrooms, bedroom upstairs, whatever it is.
No, I agree with that. But risk doesn't mean you're going to lose. Risk means you could lose, you could win.
But I think the risk that I'm seeing is that it's not like a financial risk where, again, as long as the money's sitting in trust.
Except for the opportunity cost.
The opportunity cost.
So the opportunity could go the other way. The opportunity cost, if they move in, if they were able to settle today, they made $200,000 or $300,000.
Oh, maybe that's the risk.
But if they rescind, they've lost $200,000 or $300,000. That's the risk. That's the balance.
Well, there's also the side of the financial risk of your ability to settle as well. Right. So the longer the time that it takes, the higher the risk because your personal situation can change. So the longer the time you have to wait, the more possibilities that the market can change. The economy can change. Certain things, values can change. But they can also go up.
Isn't that a risk though if you settle as well
positive.
when you have a mortgage? Doesn't that same risk exist? Like if you're in if you got a mortgage, 30-year mortgage, and you lose your job, isn't that risk still there?
Yeah, so that risk is still there, but you don't get penalised and you don't lose your deposit. Right. So with off the plan, if you're not able to settle when it's due, right, you can potentially lose the deposit that you've paid.
But you could lose your house if you can't pay the mortgage.
You could lose your house. Well, that's the same thing for the off the plan, right? But the off the plan has an added risk that you'll lose your deposit.
Yep.
Right.
If you can't settle on it.
Correct. Right. So whereas you're buying a established property, that window of risk between you buying it and settling is only a matter of weeks.
And I guess and if you can't pay your mortgage, I know the answer is you can just sell the asset. I get that. But it's more, the risk still, if you can't pay the mortgage, that risk still exists.
Yeah, so I think it's more around, the risk of being able to settle.
Get into
right?
the property. Yeah.
So there's more variables that can come into play, right? Because banks can change their lending criteria, their lending policies. Whereas if you buy an established property, typically the lending criteria isn't going to change in a matter of 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Still can, but it's not as likely. Right? But those are the things I think that, going back to your question, Michael, around how do you find a good property or a good off the plan to buy is something that you got to factor in. It's also based on your personal situation as
Agreed.
well.
And what I think is incorrect is, again, the PROPTOK at the start. Don't buy apartments. Don't buy off the plan. Anyone that draws a line, I don't agree.
That generalisation.
Yeah, I don't agree with the
yeah.
generalisation.
Yeah.
It's like don't buy regional, right? Like
Yeah.
it's all these different
Yeah.
comparisons. Like you've got to look at each market.
You really
Yeah.
need to. And there is money to be made from off the plan.
Yeah.
If you do it right.
I think it's just scary when you see stories like this. And I get the sentiment. Like some of my friends are very adamant on not wanting to buy off the plan
But
because
I can give you 100
hear.
examples of someone that's bought 5 years ago and made money.
I
that's,
agree,
you can't
but
just
if you don't have
cherry-pick.
that in your friend circle of someone having that success story and you see this, it's...
And I mean, the same goes for, if we're talking from an investment perspective, the same goes for shares, right? The same goes for any type of investment.
So true.
You can invest in a company, the value goes up,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
And then you keep holding it, something happens,
goes down.
Yeah.
the value goes to nothing.
So does that mean you're going to do a stitch with one that's gone up?
You should.
Ella?
Mate. You should.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There is lots to
It's
unpack.
going to be like a war. PROPTOK war.
Like I said at the start, we could talk for hours on this, and I think there will be future episodes where maybe we get a property developer in to talk about this, or a builder in to talk about this with us, because there is so much more to unpack, and we want our listeners and viewers to really understand the ins and outs of this so that they can make informed decisions, help others make informed decisions and informed conversations. So I'm going to leave the off the plan stigma discussion right there. I've got one more bonus video that I want to play today. And I just want to get everyone's quick opinion on the bonus, and then we'll ride off into the sunset until next week. So let's check this out.
Welcome to Dulwich Hill, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse and rented for the last 4 years by Jim Flanagan. There's just one other thing you need to know.
The Prime Minister is my landlord.
And Anthony Albanese
my
wants
goodness.
to sell.
I was issued with a notice to vacate the property last week. That is the worst possible news you can receive as a renter.
Mr. Flanagan admits he's no landlord from hell. In fact, it's been easy under Albanese, and the PM agrees.
I have been a more than fair owner of that property. I have had him in the property with the rent being about half what is the market rent.
And the numbers back that up. The townhouse is being rented for $680 a week, dropped from $900 during COVID, with the average rent for 3-bedroom houses in Dulwich Hill at $995 a week and $825 a week for 3-bed units.
It's a really tough time when you're renting at the moment, whether you're moving and trying to find a place that you can afford or hold on to places that you're already in.
Mr. Flanagan understands that the PM, as his landlord, is well within his rights to move him on, but says this eviction flies in the face of the budget his government have only just handed down.
Wanting to look after and target and increase support for renters and recognition of just how difficult and challenging it is.
A challenge Jim is now facing. In Dulwich Hill, Alex Einke, 9 News.
So there's a lot to unpack here, right? The first thing I want to say, look, I don't, I swing both ways when I have no, my political, politically,
Is that
I don't
another
have
bonus for today?
Oh, yeah, it's a bonus episode. Which way do you swing? No, but okay. So firstly, this bloke has been getting has been saving $300 a week on his rent.
Well, that's why he wants to stay.
Okay. Yeah, I know,
Yes.
but mate, come on. You're going to complain that you've been saving and all of a sudden, like, come on, man.
Yeah.
I think
This guy, like,
I think that's
I'm not a
ridiculous.
fan of Anthony
Yeah. Why?
at the best of days, right? Like, let's not get into politics. But, like, I mean, he's well within his rights to sell the property.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this, I mean, if this landlord wasn't Anthony Albanese, this thing doesn't make the news.
This guy wouldn't be living there if the landlord wasn't Anthony Albanese because he'd be complaining about $900
like,
a week.
I get he's the PM. I get there's a housing crisis, there's a rental crisis. I get it. But, like, he's well entitled to sell the property. And if he's done the right thing and kept him there at well below market rent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like this guy, he just looks...
Yeah.
And do you reckon he's gone to Current Affair or, the media
If I'm
to talk about this story?
Current Affair and I
Yeah.
hear
For
that
sure.
Anthony Albanese is evicting me,
Yeah.
mate, let's record today.
Yeah.
Why, though? Why? He's
Because
done the right... He looks stupid.
Because it's like a story that is now being featured on property now. Like,
But what does he
Yeah.
get out? What's his tenant get out of all this?
he looks silly. Like
Going to the media, what does he actually
Well, I
get
was
out
thinking
of this?
maybe the pressure might get
Yeah.
Albanese to change his
yeah,
mind.
potentially.
Yes.
Man, if I'm saving
For sure.
$300 a week, please let ACA help me continue to save $300 a week. But so I hear what you're saying about Albanese as well, right? He has done nothing wrong here. In fact, he's kept the rent low for this guy.
Yeah.
So, like, well done on that. But the optics as well, if I'm Anthony Albanese, we're talking about housing supply, crisis, et cetera, maybe I need to hold on to the property for a little bit longer.
Let me be clear. If I'm Anthony Albanese, I'm never evicting that guy.
I'm never evicting the guy. Exactly.
I'm never evicting him.
Or at least
particularly in this time.
Yeah, at least until a few terms of other
It's
prime
the timing
ministers.
of it all,
Yeah.
right? Like with the budget coming out, with conversations about
Well, if you wanna
housing
sell it-
crisis.
Or at least it can wait.
Sell it with the tenant in
Wait.
there. Like,
Or at
why-
least
Yeah.
it can wait until after the election.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a fun one, guys. We won't go too much further on that, but it leads me to next week, because next week we're going to talk about the rental trap. I think it's going to be a great topic for next week. So look forward
rental
to that.
trap.
Yeah, so it's a good
The
little
Parent
segue. Parent Trap. My daughter just started watching that. She loves that movie. Rental Trap next week. But guys, it's been another great episode. Do we want to do the goodbye, or should we do you want to try it again?
Hello. No.
Well played.
Can I come back next week?
You can come back next week. And hopefully you come back next week as well, guys. As always, follow us if you haven't already. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out.
My
And
daughter's become a listener.
Your daughter's a listener. Great. That's one extra
Scarlett,
listener.
shout
Well done, Scarlett. Scarlett, leave your comments. Let us know how you think
Yes.
Mum went. Leave your comments
Yes.
below, and we'll maybe read them next week if Charlotte does do that. But
Yeah.
guys, it's been another great week of Property Now. Looking forward to chatting to you all again next week, and we'll see you soon.
The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.